welcome to this special event on the Camden Community Impacts Resilience Fund. This is a new fund. So I'm Kevin Noonan, I'm the Director of Voluntary Action Camden. There's a lot on the call today, so if it's okay with everyone, we won't go and do introductions. If you could maybe introduce yourself in the chat, and then when we come to questions later on, just introduce yourself at that point when you have a question. We're going to record this as usual and put it on the website so that people can refer to it, and those who didn't get a chance to come to this event. So I hope that's okay with everyone. If you don't want your face to be recorded, then do switch your camera off. And if everyone could keep themselves on mute unless talking, then that helps everyone to hear better. So without further ado, what we're going to do this morning is essentially in two halves. So I'm going to do a quick introduction to the new Resilience Fund, quite a basic introduction, just going over the basics, and then we're going to get into a Q&A. So we're being joined today by Rosie Tharp and Lisa Charalambous from the council, and so they will be able to answer any questions. So without further ado, let me just go through this fund. So this is a new fund. It's actually over 2 years, but I'm really just going to focus on this year. And this year it's 750,000, and that's split across two different funds. One called the Recovery Fund, which is the larger one, 600,000, and then there's a Partnership and Networking Fund, and that's a smaller one, that's just 150,000. Okay. So the Recovery Fund, the larger one, this is grants up to 15,000. And this is about returning to business as usual. And you can fund everyday costs, staffing, rent, utility bills, all that sort of thing. And the Partnership Fund, this is the smaller fund, 150,000 total. These are slightly smaller grants of 10,000. And this is to support organizations who are either developing or establishing new partnerships, or collaborations, or deepening existing ones. And this is interesting in that you can apply as an individual organization. You can apply as the partnership or the network, and it can cover the core costs associated. So again, staffing, rent, utility bills. So that's quite practical. Okay. So both of them are a two-stage process, and it's all happening in parallel. And the first stage for both is an expression of interest that has to be in by the 29th of November. Now, given we're on the 18th, this is quite short. If you haven't made a start, it's 11 days, but don't be put off. This is just the expression of interest. The second stage will happen in January. If you get through the first stage, you'll be notified in December, and then the second stage will happen in January. Okay. An interesting aspect of this is that both of them need to address the Camden Renewal missions. Now, I'm sure you all have heard of the Camden Renewal Commission, and this commission has established 4 missions. They're calling them missions. These are their sort of areas of focus. So the first one is about food poverty and sustainability. There's one about diversity, and particularly positions of power. There's one about health and sustainability. Well, it says estates, then it also says streets. So I think that's quite broad, really, and it's you know, it's talking about being creative and sustainable. So that's a pretty broad category. And the final one is around young people. So they do want you to address where your organization fits in this scheme of things. And I think the third one for many will be the key. It's the broadest category. Okay. Now, just to go over the ways that have been set out, there are examples of how the Resilience Fund can support you. And so financial resilience, and this is all sorts of examples: developing the business plan, doing some trustee training, helping with developing strategy, particularly fundraising, maybe working on getting the building back into use, maybe supporting your digital capacity. Maybe you want to, you know, need some of this sort of kit to do more video conferencing, for example. And the other way is to respond to new and emerging needs. So maybe during the pandemic, you've come across new needs, you've set up new partnerships, you've worked in new ways, you've delivered new services. All of these can then be supported as well by this fund. Okay. And the fund guidance gives some examples of how things can be used. So it gives a number of sort of examples. Now, obviously, these are just examples. So, you know, you might do something quite different, but it gives an idea of sort of the direction. So maybe you've established a partnership with smaller BAME organizations. Maybe you're a youth organization and you're developing a partnership with a local corporate because they want to do a mentoring scheme with you. Perhaps you're a local food provider and you're developing a partnership maybe with another organization, could be a community center, for example, and you want to continue working together in the future. And the final example is maybe a network of organizations who have come together to work better in the neighborhood, or maybe around a community of interest, and they need some resource and capacity to continue and develop that work. So those are just sort of some examples to give you a flavor. So we're just going to finish up with some of the sort of bread and butter things. So eligibility. So again, as you would expect, I don't think there are any particular surprises here. You don't have to be a charity, but you've got to be not-for-profit. You've got to be a community organization, basically. You've got to have a focus on Camden residents, of course, and you do need some sort of track record. So you need a bank account with 2 signatories. You need 3 trustees. If you're unincorporated, you just need a constitution, a simple constitution. I think most organizations, you know, attending today easily fit this criteria. But if not, you can contact BAC. The final 2, they do want recent annual accounts. Obviously, if you're quite new, your accounts might not be signed off. That might be a question for Rosie and Lisa later. And also, there's a guidance that this isn't set in stone as far as I can see, but they're saying it's unlikely if you're bigger than a £2 million organization. I think this is really aimed at smaller organizations. Okay. So in your application, do state whether you meet the eligibility criteria, demonstrate the need for what you're proposing, give an idea of the difference that this funding will make. You must address the Renewal Commission missions. What will you contribute to? But bear in mind that third one, I think, is really quite broad, and you know, you may be able to contribute to one of the other three as well. Address whether you've been involved in the pandemic response. They'd like to know that. Address the financial viability of your organization, and also address what impact COVID has had. You know, particularly if you've had real difficulties, loss of income, that sort of thing. Okay, so that was really a whistle-stop tour around the basics of these two funds. And what I'd like to do now is invite questions from the audience. I don't know, Rosie and Lisa, if you'd like to maybe kick off by sort of adding to my what I've said. You know, mine was quite a whistle-stop tour of the basics. Are there particular things that I haven't drawn out that you'd like to draw attention to? And shall we stop? Let's stop sharing the screen so that we can all see each other.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, Rosie here from the Community Partnerships team. It was a really good summary, and thanks for putting this all together and hosting. I mean, I think your kind of synopsis of the fund is really right. We've tried to just make it as sort of flexible and as easy for organisations to apply and to access these funds, which is why we've tried to do it in a two-stage process to sort of reduce the amount of time in terms of the time that you're spending to get these applications in. So it's relatively light touch in the first stage, but I think Kevin's given a really good kind of focus on the areas that we'll be looking for. We know that it has been a really challenging time for the sector during COVID, and that organisations are trying to kind of come out of it. There's still quite a lot of uncertainty around what the sort of future holds. So this is a kind of 1 year fund, which is a bit of a sort of, let's kind of see where we're at. We've kept it as kind of core funding for organisations to use how they see fit. I think the Partnerships and Network Development Fund is a really kind of exciting sort of fund and an approach. It's something quite new for us as a council. It's a little bit of a sort of test and learn, and we're really interested to see what applications we get through. That sort of being able to apply as an individual organisation or as part of an existing partnership and network, and not have the requirement to deliver a project is really based on a lot of feedback we've had from partnership projects that we funded in the past, that actually it takes time to kind of develop those relationships and build those trusts, you know, build that trust. And that can be quite difficult if you've got quite a lot of pressure in terms of delivering a specific service or a project alongside that. So we really wanted to give organisations some space to just kind of explore that and dedicate some potentially some staff time or some additional resource to actually really work out what's going to be beneficial for your organisation and the people that you work with in your local community. So it is quite a small pot of funding in comparison to the recovery fund, because it is a bit of a test and learn approach. And as Kevin sort of alluded to, this is a 2-year grant programme. We're really focusing on the funding for this 1 year and kind of one-off funds, but the things that we get to learn out of this will be used to shape the future years. And I should say that there is an intention to fund beyond the 2 years. It's just that we haven't got the kind of formal approval of that to have been able to announce the kind of funding, but there is an intention that this programme will continue to run beyond the 2 years. I mean, I think that it's probably most helpful if we just go straight into kind of question and answers, because I think there'll be specific things that organisations want to pick up. But I was just going to say, Lisa, there's probably some stuff you want to add.
Thanks, Rosie. Just a couple of practical things, really. Think carefully about how much you apply for. If you're an absolutely tiny organisation with £10,000 a year, then obviously don't apply for 15,000, because that's, you know, that's more than double what you're getting. So be realistic about what you apply for. If you are unable to provide the financial information that we ask for, there's a space where you can tell us why. We know that this might be difficult for some groups, so just let us know. Let us have what you've got, and just give us an explanation. As Rosie said, we want to be as accommodating as possible. And if you don't have a bank account, then we would accept you finding an organisation, perhaps like VAC, sorry to put you on the spot, Kevin, that can perhaps agree to hold the funding for you. So that's something for you to explore. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Rosie and Lisa. So I've got a few questions. Let's just dive in. So Virginia, do you want to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Oh, hi. Thanks, Kevin. I'm from the Community Association of West Hampstead. I'm the Vice Chair and the Trustees. We've got a couple of questions. One about the main fund. If we apply for that, can we just apply for the costs that we have now, or do we have to do something extra? Do we have to demonstrate some kind of added value? That's my first question. And the second question is about the partnership fund. Who can be a partner? What sort of organisation?
So Rosie and Lisa, who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I'd happy to come in there, Virginia. So in terms of the sort of main fund, the recovery fund, I mean, it's in terms of the sort of added value. I mean, it's the, you know, if you've got running costs of the organisation, what we're interested in is what your organisation does, you know, the things that you've done throughout the pandemic and how this grant will help you to transition. So we wouldn't be expecting you to kind of massively demonstrate something kind of above and beyond, but we would expect you to demonstrate the sort of the value of your organisation through your application. In terms of the partnership fund, I mean, you could work with a local faith organisation, you could work with corporates, provided that the organisation that is submitting the application meets one of the eligibility criteria, effectively that you are not for profit. So we couldn't accept an application from, you know, a business or a private company. But you could work with a range of partners, or you could choose to work with one specific partner. It might be that you want to do some more work with your local GP practice or health practitioners. It's really quite open. Have you got a sort of sense, if there is this kind of specific example in mind?
Could it be with a school, for example?
Yeah. So
it doesn't matter if it's a Camden, that sort of network.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be asking you for sort of more financial information in the second stage of the application, so more information about how the budget would be split. So if, for example, it was a school or another kind of statutory organisation that receives funding, we would expect the funding to go mainly to the voluntary and community sector organisation, but you could certainly go into a partnership with them.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Great. Okay, so I've got questions from Barrington and Samantha. So Barrington first, then Samantha.
Hi, my name is Barrington Reeves from Homestart Camden in Islington, the new funding and projects manager. I suppose it goes back to the partnerships. Does the organisation that you're thinking about developing a partnership with have to be from Camden? Or can they be from outside of the borough of Camden, but working with us, they'd be delivering work in Camden.
So if they were going, nice to meet you, Barrington, because I know we've just been on an email trail, so nice to see you and welcome. So if the organisation that was kind of putting in that application was not from Camden, we would expect them to be able to demonstrate how they serve the kind of residents of Camden. And we have said about them having a kind of track record. I mean, Home Start Camden and Islington, I know you work across both boroughs, but you have got that very clear kind of track record. So if you were going into partnership with an organisation from outside of Camden, it would be better if their application came from Home Start Camden and Islington rather than the other organisation.
Yeah, I was going to say that we would be the lead partner and be working with somebody else, but the work that they do is kind of quite specific.
Yeah.
And working with families that have either parent in prison on ex-offending, coming out of prison, but they've got children under 5, so it's kind of really specific work. So we'd be the main lead, but they would be supporting us to do that.
And you'd be able to demonstrate how that sort of partnership would help you develop a specialism that would benefit residents of Camden, and you already have those existing relationships. So absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Barrington. That's a good question. And can anyone hear me?
Now we can.
You can, okay. Sorry about that, bit of feedback. So Samantha, we have your question.
Hi, yeah, my name is Samantha Childs and I work for Elfrida Rathbone Camden. I'm the education manager for Leighton College here. My question, I think, comes off the back of Barrington's in regards to the people that use our services here. So for one side of Elfrida Rathbone, the users are Camden residents, but on the other side, on the Leighton College side, they all obviously attend here in Camden, but some of them may come from out of borough. So again, with that still, if we were to be working to where it will be benefiting learners from out of borough, would that still be okay because they're using a Camden service, or would that impact how we could use that funding?
I can take that, Rosie, if you want. What we ask, what percentage of your beneficiaries are from Camden? So we are aware that a lot of organisations will have beneficiaries that come from neighbouring boroughs. But what we want you to be able to demonstrate is that the majority of your users are from Camden, and that would be fine, and that your focus is Camden.
Okay. Okay, so I do have one further question, which could be quite quick to answer. You mentioned, Rosie, you mentioned it being a 1-year programme, but also mentioned 2 years. So can I just clarify, if we apply for the funding, is it to go over a 2-year period? Or is it funding per year, or is it over a 1-year period? Can I just clarify that, please?
Yeah, sure. So the fund, so for this year, it's 750,000 in total, and that would be over 12 months. So if you were awarded the recovery fund, it would be 15,000 to spend on the organisation over the next 12 months, and the partnership funds up to 10k again over 12 months. We will then be announcing the second year of the programme, so there'll be the additional funding. I can't quite remember what the total is, but it's 1.92 million over 2 years, so less the 750,000. So my maths isn't good enough, but 1.2. The remaining 1.2 million, there will be some announcements as to what that fund is going to look like. There will likely be under that some further funding for the partnerships work.
Thank you.
there'll probably be some other bits like capacity building and some other bits alongside that, but a lot of that will be developed based on the kind of learning that we get from this round.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks. I mean, just to sort of clarify, because that was going to be one of my questions. So the 2 years are quite separate. So anyone who doesn't apply this year is not excluded from applying maybe in next year's round.
That's right.
So yes, okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
good to know. That's good to know. Okay, I've got a question from Anna Walsh now. Anna, introduce yourself and fire away.
Hi, my name is Anna Walsh. I'm the projects lead at HealthWatch Camden. I was wondering if you could just briefly touch on the reporting aspect if you are selected for this grant. I guess I'm just trying to picture what it might look like, because some of these outputs are maybe less tangible than the than previous sort of groups of funding, like the value of a spending on partnership. How do you kind of prove the impact of that in a tangible way for your purposes?
It's a good question, Anna. Lisa, were you?
I haven't got a clear answer, because we imagine it to be quite light touch, but we will want to know how you have to be able to demonstrate to us. We don't know how yet. I imagine it'll be fairly simple. Demonstrate that you have used the funding in the way that you said you've used the funding. Basically, that's what we're going to want to know. And
there's some conversations going on with colleagues across the council, with some researchers at UCL at the moment, looking at some ways of kind of measuring, particularly around equalities work, and there's quite a strong focus on equalities in this fund. But we're actually working with organisations to kind of develop what some of those metrics and frameworks can look like, because this is quite a test and learn. I mean, particularly with the partnerships and network development, that's some of the sort of work we'd like to do alongside grantees, is kind of develop the longer term kind of monitoring framework. But as Lisa says, for this grant, for the first year of grant, it will be relatively light touch. So it would be more of a kind of narrative, particularly around the partnerships and network development. You know, how has it enabled your organisation to develop and grow? What have you learned? We're very much interested in as well what hasn't worked so well. So not just the kind of, oh, it was a fantastic project and we, you know, or it was a fantastic partnership and this all went swimmingly. We're kind of interested in what has been a real challenge and how you've kind of overcome those. So yeah, it would be a kind of narrative report.
And also with core funding, as Rosie said earlier, where we would be funding the core funding because we think that your organisation is a good organisation that provides value to residents. So that's what we would want to see from the core funding. As a result of the core funding, for example, we were able to pay our rent, which meant that we were then able to continue to provide these services. I mean, that's a crude example, but it's that kind of thing.
Thanks. And I suppose sort of underpinning all of that, it really probably needs to be proportionate on both sides, because not just on the VCS side, but on the officer side, you're potentially going to be maybe, I don't know, maybe giving out 70 grants. So that's quite a burden of, you know, of reporting on both sides. So I suppose there's a need to keep it proportionate for everyone, really.
I think that's a really good point as well, Kevin, and just to pick up that there is no minimum kind of grant request, and Lisa made the point earlier that if you're an organisation with a very small turnover, then we wouldn't recommend that you put in for the maximum amount, and do be realistic about the amount that you can apply for and that you can effectively manage. But you know, if we were awarding a grant, say of £2,000, we wouldn't want to be requesting the sort of information that you would expect more for a much larger grant of a kind of 20 or 30,000 pounds. So it's a really good point about proportionality. And just to pick up, but just on the finances stuff, because Kevin, you mentioned earlier about the 2 million threshold not seeming to be a particularly kind of hard eligibility criteria, and that's right. We recognise that, you know, throughout COVID, there were a lot of organisations that had secured quite a lot of the emergency funds. So we wouldn't want an organisation that had sort of had quite a skewed kind of income not to be able to apply because they were sort of over that threshold. But as Lisa said, there's space in the application form to tell us a bit more about your circumstances and your situation.
I've got a question from myself about because it's interesting that that you want the missions addressed, and I think the missions, there's always two ways of looking at them. There's a very general approach, but actually the missions, some of the missions are written strangely specifically. So for instance, there's one, as you would expect, about diversity. But it's actually really about diversity in positions of power and preparing people for positions of power. Now, there may be many organisations in Camden who feel they're addressing an aspect of diversity, but not that particular one. And I'm just interested to know how sort of much organisations have to be hitting these four missions, because they can be read as quite specific, really.
It's a good question. I'm interested to see Lisa's answer on this as well, because we've had discussions about the missions. To me, they're sort of both specific and quite broad at the same time, in that wonderfully spectacular, you know, council way of getting these things across. I would expect that most organisations' work would fall within, you know, some or all of those missions. I mean, effectively, the missions are around making Camden a better place with more opportunities for our residents. You know, most organisations are committed to working around equality. If you're really struggling on how to make the kind of work that you do fit within one of those, we'd be happy to kind of have a chat with you. I think the point about sort of diversity and power, you know, you could be running an employment programme, some after school mentoring, you know, any of the work that you're doing around any equalities issues, to my mind, fits within that mission, even if it's not a clear sort of, you know, kind of leadership program or something like that. So I wouldn't get too, you know, don't get too hung up on trying to make it fit exactly. That, you know, it's interesting you think they're specific, because we have conversations about sometimes they can be a bit kind of too high level, and what's the kind of meaning behind them. I don't know, Lisa, if there's anything you want to.
No, I agree with you, Rosie. I was going to say, if you're running an after school mentoring program, for example, for young Congolese people, then I would argue, if I were you, that this is the beginning of, you know, perhaps people progressing to more leadership positions sometime in the future. But, you know, it's just the first stage, and I think that's absolutely fair enough. We're not expecting you to say that as a result of this, someone is going to join the council next week. I mean, that's not what we're looking for. Well, unless that is what you're going to do, that would be great.
Great. Okay, thanks for that clarification. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat, Ricky, if I missed any questions there. Just a basic one. So there's no, is it right that you could apply for both? Is that, or should you do one or the other?
You can apply for both. I mean, we are expecting there to be a large number of applications to this fund. We think it probably will be quite oversubscribed. We'll be looking across the applications to ensure that there's a sort of demographic as well as geographic spreads. If you've got, if you've got two very strong applications, you could certainly be invited to stage 2, but as a caveat, we are saying that because we're likely to have such a high number of applications, we don't want to give people false hope that they will be successful in both of them. But if you're going to apply for one as the recovery fund as an individual organisation, and then you put in with the partnership, as part of a kind of existing partnership or with a network of other organisations, and they're both strong applications, then it is quite likely that you'll get taken through. But just to manage expectations in terms of the kind of level of applications, we are expecting it to be kind of heavily oversubscribed, which is again in part is why we've done two stages, because the ones that we take through to stage 2 will then have a much higher success rate.
And there is more money in year 2 as well, isn't there?
Yes, and organisations can apply again in year 2.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got a question from Matt. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for organising this call and the fund. My name is Matt. I'm from a charity called Nazamat Foundation. We're based in the Camden borough. We are a very small charity, and our main charity's work is tackling religious and cultural homophobia, providing support to individuals, particularly LGBTQI individuals from religious and culturally conservative backgrounds, including as well also parents. Now, due to the nature of our work, even though we're a very small charity, our service users are spread out across the UK. Before the pandemic, our support group was held in King's Cross. So I just wondered, it's very closely connected to Barrington's and Samantha's questions from earlier, really. As a charity like ours, who is locally based, who services the needs from a local base, but those residents are outside of, well, not all of them are outside of Camden, but sometimes we don't necessarily even collect address details, for example. And then charities like ours, we typically have challenges where we're not a large national charity, so we can't compete with the larger funds, but at the same time we're a local charity, but we find it challenging to obtain local funding because our service users are spread out across not only London but also outside as well. I mean, just to give an example, we have service users that will travel down from Scotland to use our asylum support services to help LGBT users find asylum in the UK. I just wondered if there was any scope for charities like ours, or is this not a fund that would be suitable for a charity like ours? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, Matt, and it's a sort of difficult position that you find yourselves in almost, particularly if, I mean, when you were talking, one of the things I was going to ask was, do you have a sense of how many or a kind of rough percentage of what service users do come from Camden? If you're, and I appreciate the nature of your work is quite sensitive, so you're not always getting those details from people, and you don't want to create those additional barriers in terms of people accessing support. I think if you could provide some demonstration or evidence that that you are doing some locally based work, and that there is some work that is benefiting some Camden residents, we would consider that. It's a very, very specialist type of service that you seem to offer. I think that there would be a lot of organisations based in Camden that would sort of benefit from a connection with an organisation like yours, and there's a couple that I've got in mind, particularly talking about your work around refugees and asylum seekers. So I'd be happy to have a bit of a chat with you offline, if maybe making a few suggestions of organisations that you might want to consider getting in contact with around the kind of partnerships side of things. It's not a kind of definitive answer either way. I don't know whether you do have any evidence that could strengthen your application in terms of serving some people in Camden. And I would say then, if you were looking at putting in sort of a percentage of your kind of core costs, say your overall running costs, if you could demonstrate that, say, 25 or 30% of your beneficiaries come from Camden, and then sort of look at what that kind of amount you would apply for in relation to that, would be a kind of a sort of valid way of, there would be a rationale behind what you were applying for, basically.
Great, thank you, Rosie. Yes, please, if we can have that conversation, that would be great. Because what I'm finding is that you know, LGBT charities, because LGBT people don't necessarily all live where other LGBT individuals are. They travel into, for reasons of safety, they travel across and away from the area they live, because there's high risks of them being spotted going into a venue that might be seen as an LGBT friendly venue. That would be really good, thank you. And also because charities like ours are kind of probably a large portion of our work is campaign based. So our campaigns benefit people across the UK. For example, this year, our campaigning reached 50 million individuals within the UK, which is a high number for a small charity. So those would be spread out across, but we would never have the data to understand where those individuals were located within the UK.
Great, thanks. And Matt, if you could just drop me an email as well, it'd be good to make contact. I think that it's just worth saying, and I'm sure all of you know this, but this is a bit of a Camden issue, and it's partly because many migrants, refugees and others maybe start off in Camden and then get distributed around the country, but find this, it's got great connections. We've got King's Cross and Pancras, etc. And so, you know, we find ourselves at the AC in a similar position, supporting organisations that may have, many people actually around the country. Not everyone is in Camden, but for historic reasons, things kind of started out here. So, yes, you're not alone, Matt. Okay, I don't know. Are there any other questions in the chat? One question in chat from Guy. Okay, do you want to just read it out, Ricky?
So, would intercultural therapy and mental health support offered to Camden residents fit the criteria?
And that was from Gayu. Gayu, do you want to just expand on your question?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm from Nafsiyat. We offer mental health support in the form of counseling and therapy to residents of Camden, Haringey, Enfield, and also Islington. We are based in Islington, but most of our cases come from Camden. So I just wanted to know if we fit that criteria, if mental health support fits the criteria.
Yes, and of course, yeah, we know Nafsiyat well from many years. Yes, let's just have a look at that criteria. You're thinking about the missions, which mission you would fit into.
So there's two: diversity in positions of power, or it could come under health.
Yeah, Guy, I mean, it totally, you know, it sort of totally fits. And I think that in terms of the missions, the two that you've picked up on, I mean, I think, Kevin, your point in the introduction was that it talks about estates, doesn't it? Healthy estates, but we're talking about healthy and vibrant places. And I think, you know, mental health is really key to that. So yes, and I think, Guy, your question is a bit similar to others in terms of you're working across several different areas, but you work with people from Camden as well as those from Enfield and other boroughs. So I think, yeah, the same. As long as you can demonstrate that there are that there are Camden residents who are benefiting, then yes, you'd be eligible to apply.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Lisa, I think you were on mute. I think Lisa was just...
I was going to say healthy streets need healthy people, don't they, really? So it definitely fits.
Thank you.
Great, okay. I don't know if there's any other questions. I can't see any hands up. If there's anyone I've missed, if you wave, or if there are any questions in the chat. Otherwise, if not, I will draw things towards a conclusion. Actually, Tara, I can see you've got a question. Introduce yourself. Tara, you're on mute. Try now.
I'm Stella, and I work with Brent Women's Advisory Resource Center as a trustee also. So we've been operating in Camden for many years now, and also we provide services to Brent Council citizens or beneficiaries. What I'm asking is this: we've got some organizations who have recently constituted themselves here in Camden, and they're in this building 244A. Kilburn High Road, and they are struggling with funding, and also they provide employment services. So we want to help them to actually provide proper services to Camden citizens who are unemployed people, and also to commence with what we used to call Job Center Plus before, linking their services up to GWP. So to capture those who are on benefits, because the organizations they have expertise from the nursing profession, who have just established their employment services, and care work is actually in demand here in the UK. So they need some sort of guidance. Although they are properly constituted, they have need for operational document services, how to monitor, how to evaluate, how to do this and how to do that. And they are struggling with funding. They don't have money to pay for office space. So, and there's another organization here, they're from Morocco, and they have a lot of Moroccans who use their services. They don't have funding also. So we intend to team up with the two, I think there are 3 organizations here who have recently constituted themselves, and to know how we can work together as partners and help people who are unemployed to get into employment, and those who need some sort of training, parents, young parents who have children and are unable to meet up with financial commitments with regards to providing enough for their children, which you call food poverty. And at times it's not food poverty. At times it's something to deal with other issues of behavioral issues in families, whereby the parents are unable to control their children and they don't know the means of proper communication. So these are issues that we have identified, and by identifying these issues, we then know how many families have vulnerable children who can.
So can I just summarize?
By the company, by people in the community itself, and get into bad groups and start behaving the way the family doesn't want them to behave.
Right.
So the norms and values of the family is what we intend to address.
Yeah, let me just summarize.
You're waving your hands.
It sounds like you've got a range of organizations. You're around Kilburn, you're on the border. So you've got some Camden, beneficiaries. There's different organizations. You've got beneficiaries spread out. And it sounds like if these organizations, are they working together? Is it the issue about working together, or is it the issue about
the issue about working together and helping them to develop their services also, because they are new? Although they have bank accounts, they have tried somehow, but
right. So this could be right. So this I'm going to hand over to Rosie and Lisa but it looks like, let me just summarize. So it sounds like you could come together as a network to support these small organizations. And then your question is, if you're on the Kilburn border and you've got beneficiaries from different places, is it, are enough of them from Camden? Maybe, Rosie, Lisa, what do you think about this? Kilburn's an example of a tricky area, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's, you know, there's lots of organisations based very near a kind of arbitrary line, aren't there? Is and one side of the borough. I think the same with the sort of other examples, provided there are people from Camden who are benefiting, and it sounds like there are, you know, there is work going on in Camden, then absolutely apply. In terms of the kind of partnership, I think is some of the question about these organisations being new, but then in terms of working as a partnership, that's something we would really welcome, of working with an organisation like yourselves that is more established and can help organisations develop and grow and think about the services that they're providing. It sounds like you've probably got quite a strong partnership application that probably sits across almost all of the renewal missions. So we're talking about the sort of diversity, empower, their health, and also opportunities for young people, as well as sort of poverty and food poverty that you've touched on. So yes, I would say you could definitely apply.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, and if you could drop us, maybe drop us an email afterwards, just with a bit more sort of detail and information about your work, that would help us, and we could help you with the questions in more detail. If there's no more questions, I'm going to draw things to a close. I'll thank you all for coming, and especially to Rosie and Lisa for coming to answer all the questions. I think this is a really great opportunity. It's nice to see. I know these are small amounts of money in a way, but it's a sizable pot, and it is nice to see something that's really open to everyone, sort of all the small organisations, because there are so many across Camden. So this is something we really welcome. So do get your skates on. The closing date is the 29th of November. So as I said, that's only 11 days away, but remember that's for the initial expression of interest. So that's, you know, that's not a detailed application. So it's quite feasible to get an application in that time. So I think I will draw things to a close there. Good luck with your application, and obviously if you've got more questions, send them to us. There's a FAQ on the Camden Council website. I'm sure Rosie and Lisa would also help with any questions that you have. But thank you all, and good luck with your applications, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thanks
Bye,
very
everyone.
much.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah, and thanks Kevin and Vac for
Yeah,
organising.
thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.